Thank you. I want to also welcome everyone here on behalf of the School of Education, and I'm delighted to have an opportunity to introduce the panelists today. The facilitator, I understand, of the panel will be Becca Schwartz on the end, who is the Refugee Resettlement Coordinator for Jewish Social Services of Dane County. Becca is a Middleton native who recently moved back to the area after working in various parts of East and West Africa for over a decade. She earned her bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from the University of Iowa and an MBA from Drexel University before joining the Peace Corps, and where she worked in Africa in small business development. And then the next speaker, I don't know if you guys are going in order, but in order on the panel here anyway, is Nancy Vue Tran, who's the Director of Grants and Development for Freedom Inc. In her role at Freedom Inc., she works to engage low to no income communities of color in Dane County by coupling direct services with leadership development and community organizing involving racial and gender justice. Nancy's a California native and the first of 6 children in her family to attend college. After attending law school at the University of Wisconsin, she worked for 6 years as a public defender in Dane County, representing adults in criminal court and mental health proceedings, and she recently has been running a campaign for access to mental health services for Hmong and Khmer elders. And the next speaker, Matthew Wolfgram, is a senior researcher at the Center for Research on College Workforce Transitions, and author of a recently published report called Documenting Higher Education for Refugees in Wisconsin. Matthew is an anthropologist of education and an ethnographer whose research focuses on refugee, low-income, and other minoritized students' access and experiences in higher education, and with college workforce transitions. And Maryam Ali is a student at UW-Madison who was born and raised in Somalia. Her family left Somalia during her last year of middle school due to security reasons, and her family traveled widely but ended up settling in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where they settled as refugees. Maryam was able to continue her education, graduating from high school, and in 2012 her family moved to Madison, where she went to Madison College and then to Edgewood College and earned her bachelor's degree in education, and she's currently pursuing her master's degree in educational leadership and policy analysis here at UW-Madison. So again, thank you for coming, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Thank you both for the introductions, and I'm so glad to see such a full room for this panel discussion. As they said, my name is Becca Schwartz. I'm the Resettlement Coordinator at Jewish Social Services, and I have been for just over 2 years. I feel at once that it has been almost a lifetime of doing this work, and yet it just started yesterday. So there's a lot of information that I'll throw at you, and we'll leave some time at the end for questions. So just a little bit about Jewish social services generally and other services that we provide, along with refugee resettlement, which we recently restarted in 2016. Previously, we had been doing refugee resettlement focused on the Soviet Jewish population up until the early 2000s, and then stopped that program and started again, like I said, in 2016. We are no longer resettling Jewish refugees because there pretty much are not any Jewish refugees anymore. Also, that there is a much greater need in other populations. So we also provide case management for seniors and others, regardless of their religious background. And we also have a chaplaincy program, as well as some senior programs and other lecture programs throughout the year. I don't want to go there yet. Who can tell me how do you define the term refugee? Does anyone know? what is a refugee? Yes, go ahead.
A person that needs to escape their homeland for various reasons, whether it's political or religious, etc.
Right. Okay, so a refugee has a well-founded fear of persecution. A refugee has left their home country. Someone who has that fear of persecution and maybe has left their hometown or even their region of their country, but has not left their home country, is not a refugee, as internally displaced person. So every person who is arriving here as a refugee has gone through extensive background checks, both from the UN side of things and from the side of our government, Homeland Security, FBI, etc. Does anyone know what an SIV is? Special Immigrant Visa?
I think it's usually for folks who helped the United States military efforts in a foreign country.
Right. So where are people with SIV coming from?
Afghanistan, Iraq.
Yes. Very good. So an SIV, when they come to us as a resettlement agency, we treat them exactly the same as any other refugee. They do not have to flee their home country. They come here direct from Afghanistan or Iraq. And the only other difference is that they are automatically eligible for their green card on arrival. Refugees get permanent residency after 12 months of residence here. Okay, I'll go into this. Asylum seeker, with the government that we have now and the media that we have now, there's a lot of confusion around asylum seekers, refugees, immigrants, undocumented immigrants, etc. An asylum seeker, in many ways, is very much the same as a refugee. They are experiencing persecution due to a number of factors, political opinion, membership in a certain social group, etc. But they come here first and then ask for that status. Refugees ask for that status abroad and then are brought here. Does that make sense? These are the numbers going back to 1975 of how many refugees came into this country through the official program and where they were from. So what do you notice about this chart?
Correlates with the wars.
Yeah. What about the low points in this chart? Yes. Yeah. So Trump was elected in 2016. In 2017, he enacted a bunch of executive orders to curb that number. So if you guys see my little arrow, so this is 2017. President Obama had set that number at 110,000. It is totally determined by the president how many refugees are going to be admitted in any given year. Obama had set it at 110,000, which would have been about here, and about half that came in that year. After which last year, the presidential determination, the number was set at 50,000, and less than half of that came in. And you'll see that that is on par with these 2 years. What happened there?
W.
Right, what happened then? Right, because you can see W was president for 8 years. And it was substantially higher after those 2 years. So how does the admissions program work? I've spoken a little bit about it, but first, and the people who have actually been through this process, you can feel free to tell me I'm wrong, because I have not been through this process. It's just sort of what I hear happens. So you leave your country, you are fleeing your country for a reason. You arrive in that second country, and you register with UNHCR. As a family, sometimes as an individual, and then you start going through background checks with the United Nations. UNHCR stands for United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Then the small, teeny tiny minority of those cases that the United Nations thinks will pass through our stricter background checks are referred to the US State Department. At that time, the State Department starts to implement their own background checks and also brings in the Department of Homeland Security and other US intelligence agencies to ensure that the people who are coming are not going to come and do harm to our country and its citizens. Essentially, what we understand is that if a terrorist was going to want to come and do harm to our country, this is a really risky and bad idea of a way for them to come. Because there's lots and lots of ways for their intentions to be caught. So after they have passed through that, they are referred to one of 9 national resettlement agencies. Ours is called HIAS. It used to stand for Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, and it is the oldest refugee agency in the world. 5 others of those 9 are all faith-based, so the Catholic Charities, or actually it's Conference of Catholic Bishops, Lutheran Immigrant and Refugee Services, etc. Then each of those has affiliates. There are 350 across the country affiliates who do the work on the ground. That is what we do. We are assigned cases from HIAS. We say, yes, we can do a good job. We have the language. We have the ability. We have the health care to provide to these cases who are coming. Or we haven't done this really very much, but we may say, no, we can't resettle a family of 10 in Madison because where are we going to house them? We can't, maybe we say no because language is going to be too difficult for us to find. Like I said, we don't do that very often. So the numbers going through this process start with a lot at the top and trickle down to very few at the end. We had a speaker on a panel from UNHCR, and it's less than 1% of refugees who are ever resettled in a third country. The vast majority will eventually go home to their home country when it's safe. The next largest minority will permanently resettle in that second country, and it is a teeny tiny fraction of people who actually make it through that process and are able to be resettled in a third country. We also, I have at the bottom, there's thousands of volunteers and other private citizens who help us with what we do. It really does take an army to do what we are tasked with doing. So the program that we talk about the most is called Reception and Placement. That is the initial program of welcoming refugees and the first 3 months of getting them as close to self-sufficient as possible. I want you to imagine going to another country that you don't speak the language and becoming self-sufficient in 3 months. It's not very often possible, so we do provide ongoing case management and support for people too. But the goal of this program is self-sufficiency. Here is just a list of some of the tasks that we are required to do by our contract with the State Department. So there are actually 2 gentlemen who applied for their Social Security cards today. We're helping them enroll in public benefits today, setting up housing for them next week. This third one, assistance in compliance with U.S. law, it always makes me very nervous. Like, how do you explain all that there is to be explained about U.S. law to someone who's new? Knock on wood, we haven't had any big issues yet.
Having federal law, also state.
Yeah, self-sufficiency. They need to be able to live here without breaking the law. So you also see there's school and ESL enrollment. For the most part, we're looking, when we're thinking about that in the first 3 months especially, we're not talking about higher education at that point, but I wouldn't rule it out. It's mostly primary and secondary school. So here's a little bit about resettlement in Madison and Wisconsin overall. This is a map showing, the blue countries are showing where our clients are coming from. So we have Central African Republic, that gentleman just arrived yesterday, there's just one person so far. There's many from DR Congo, which is the big country right here. I wish I could zoom in because we have people from Rwanda and Burundi as well. The red, well, Syria, Iraq, and Pakistan. The red is where people have fled to from their home countries. So where have they been waiting out this process? And what do you think purple is? Those countries are both. People are both fleeing, so Burundi is purple. I don't know if you can see it, it's tiny. Burundi is purple because we have Congolese refugees who fled to Burundi many years ago, and we also have Burundian families who fled Burundi somewhat more recently due to political issues there. Afghanistan is also purple. So I was asked, and I sort of dived into this, who is being resettled in Wisconsin? And so the largest population, it's kind of small there, but it's Burma. And I believe, I've heard, I wanted to double check, but I believe that Milwaukee is actually the largest, has the largest population of Burmese and outside of Asia. So you have Iraqis sort of peaking around 2014, also Somalis peaking a little bit around 2014. So I just sort of put that chart together, but they're all dwarfed by the numbers of Burmese. 1 year, Milwaukee resettled 1,000 Burmese refugees in 1 year, which that seems like it was a very stressful time probably. Here's some more numbers that I found, just sort of putting the graph into numbers. So these are the largest populations, the significant refugee populations. And the largest resettlement locations is by far Milwaukee. They have affordable housing. They have, public transportation that is better than here. And so it is a good site. Although Catholic Charities last year closed their resettlement operation. So it isn't all terribly easy. The Fox Valley is second, and Madison is third when we're looking at the last 10 years. So specific challenges for refugees that I have found is generally they have the same challenges as people who are experiencing poverty in the United States, but then they put on top of that, you may not speak the language, you're coming from a different culture, you have this disjointed lives and very likely a history of trauma. So, on top of just being poor, which not everyone is poor, but you're sort of starting from a very basic level, possibly working for minimum wage, then you can get an idea of the challenges that people are experiencing. There's also this last point, we have seen it as a particular challenge. Not earning a lot of money, yet feeling a sense of obligation to people back home, that you're in America, you're earning lots of money in the view of people overseas. So you need to send money home to help support us. So I was reflecting on refugee education. We do not have any, so we do have several clients who are going through ESL class at Madison College. We do have several high school students. Like I said, we started this back in 2016, so it's been not a long time. We also have 2 maybe more people who are going through a high school equivalency program at Madison College. So that is sort of the extent of the higher education that we have right now. But some things to consider, that like any population of people in the world, there are people who have almost no formal education, and I've heard this story a few times, Lutheran Social Services, who was resettling up until recently in Madison, they had a family who arrived with, everyone in the family had at least a master's degree, and they had several PhDs within the family. And in some ways, resettling a family like that, who doesn't speak English, is more difficult than resettling a family with no formal education, because there's expectations. And if you can't speak the language, what you can do for work is pretty limited regardless of what kind of degrees you have. So, like I said, language is most often the first barrier that people experience, but not always. We've been resettling more and more people who have a pretty good level of English when they arrive. Income is the next, and the ability to navigate the systems that we have. So we have a lot of resources for people who can't afford school, but they may not know about those resources. And helping them to navigate that can be somewhat of a challenge, and just having the income to pay for school eventually when that need is there. So another thing that I've noticed, and this is very anecdotal, but every parent, even the 21-year-old parents that come in through our program, have expressed to us that education for their children is one of their most important things. So, a lot of the younger people are thinking, I want to go to college too, even if I am already a parent. But sometimes that's focused on the next generation, that we're here, we're going to take advantage of being here, and my son or daughter is definitely going to get that education that I wasn't able to get. So that's something that we do here a lot. This is my pretty much last slide, because people wonder what they can do to help. We are always looking for volunteer interpreters. Here are some of the languages that we would be looking for. And that is changing pretty often. We didn't have any need for Arabic recently, and we just got our first Syrian family since Inauguration Day back in February, so that was really exciting. There's also, I have some flyers about it up here, our Community Action for Refugee Arrivals. If you want to assemble a team who is collecting donations to set up one apartment for one family, that's awesome. And we also work very closely with an organization called Open Doors for Refugees, and they are also always looking for more volunteers, and they have a pretty active Facebook page, and that's a good way to find them. So I think would now be a good time for questions, or should I just keep going, do you think?
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah. Does anyone have any questions right now?
Yeah, one concern that's raised by, at least at the camp of those who are opposed to resettlement, bring people in, is that of disease like TB and other diseases like that. Is that really much of a concern? Have there been outbreaks of disease?
So there are, on occasion, we would get a notification from the CDC that there is a concern, but everyone is screened for TB. No one with active TB is allowed to come here. They have to have medical treatment before they can get on a plane and come here. So it's not active or contagious anymore. There's also, for African refugees, there's Ebola screenings. So they do a pretty good job screening for communicable diseases before they come over. Okay. Maybe we'll save the questions for after the panel. So I have the pleasure of asking asking this panel the questions after that sort of overview of how refugee resettlement works here in Madison. And so I wanted to start with asking the question, can you briefly share a little bit about your connection with refugees in higher education? Nancy, do you want to go first?
You guys hear me? So I'm Nancy Vue Tran. I'm Hmong American. I was born in 1979 in Spokane, Washington, but I am a neutral child or refugee. And I work with a nonprofit here in town called Me. We work with Black, Cambodian, and Hmong clients, mostly in Dane County. We do direct service and we do organizing work. You'll hear about our organizing work around No Cost School, which is our educational justice work. We do Right to Return, which is our work around deportation. And we also do reproductive justice work, which is around women's ability to make decisions around what is safe and good for their families. And that rolls into No Cost Schools as well. And to me, all of those things tie into this topic that we're going to talk about today. And we work with about 250 clients every year. And then on top of that, we work with about maybe 300 or 400 additional family members of those survivors. And that's our client base. And then on top of that, we have members and other folks in the community that we organize that we work with as well. And that's, so my interaction with refugees is around direct services and what happens when they are thrown into our community to exist and live among us. How do we continue to sustain them when they're here?
So I'm Matt Wolfgram. I came at this issue of higher education for refugees about a year ago when I started investigating it as a researcher. And there's not a lot of really good work on this particular problem. It's one of the first things I mean, there's some, and there's a growing interest. I mean, the number of people in this room kind of indicates that interest. So there's a growing interest. I started a project, recently had a small report of preliminary findings that we produced. And that was based on interviews with refugee resettlement providers, other service providers, and educators who have worked to support the higher education goals of refugees communities in Wisconsin. And so it identified some of the barriers to accessing higher education. But we talked about some of those from GLY, some of those really well. And then now more recently, the transition of this research to working with refugees themselves to document some of their own experiences, struggling to access higher education, also in higher education institutions, their experiences, and hopefully to identify some supports and pathways that can support the education goals of refugees. So that's kind of like coming at it from a research angle, and trying to identify barriers and supports for higher education for refugees.
Hi, my name is Maryam, and I am a refugee that came from Somalia with my family. And we set up in Burundi, Wisconsin. So I've been living in Wisconsin for 8.5 years now. And I started my higher education journey here in Wisconsin for my fellowship. That's basically my interest in doing.
Thank you. Can everyone hear okay? Okay, good. Right. A little bit louder, like just talk a little bit closer to the microphone. And I think you can take it off if that's easier. Okay.
All right.
So the next question is, what are the major challenges that refugee newcomers encounter in the American school system? Feel free to share a couple stories about one or two of the major challenges facing refugee students.
So I think everyone has to understand that refugee is a legal term. It's a legal status, and to me, like even though my family was able to come here as refugees because of their participation in the war, in the Vietnam War, I actually align myself with all folks who are deemed not legal, natural US-born citizens. I don't even know how to say it. So I align myself with the struggles of the folks in Mexico and other countries, African refugees, other countries, because to me, refugee is a legal status. What that means to me is that people think of refugees as this newcomer term. But you will know that, and on that diagram, you'll see that most of the Asian refugees that came to our country was in the 80s. So they are no longer newcomers. It doesn't mean that they still don't have the same issues that new refugees have. And so I think that is a very problematic narrative. And if you also don't know, Wisconsin is home to probably the second or third largest Hmong population in the US. And the Hmong community continues to struggle with resettling in the U.S. Even me, who was born in the U.S., who was a child refugee, continued to experience the trauma of war, and my child will continue to suffer the trauma of war because it is something that our community hasn't done a great job of addressing. And so I work in Freedom where we deal with Hmong elders who constantly still deal with the trauma of war, their children and their children and their children. And so I think it's really problematic to think of refugees only as a newcomer status, and also to remember that it's a legal status. And so there are a lot of problems tied to that. When you stop allowing people to come due to their refugee status, like in the Hmong community, it leads to problems like international abusive marriages, because now people aren't granted the ability to come here just by virtue of coming here. They're not going through war in the sense that we know it. So a lot of times things like international abusive marriages will happen where young women will be brought over to the US married to very old Hmong men or older Hmong Southeast Asians, because that might be their only way of getting to the US, for instance. So it leads to all these other issues that we need to think about because of the way that we've set up how refugees are admitted to our country. So I think that narrative is really important. We need to expand it. And I also think that a lot of, in terms of education, a lot of refugee students don't really have access to higher education the same way that other students have, because one, they don't have that experience to model off of. And when I was in college, which is when I graduated in 2001, access to higher education was still a problem. It's problematic to me to see that it's still a problem today, and that the same conversation is still round and round and round about how do we get kids into college. And I think the problem actually isn't, as you all who might be potential scholars and do research in this area, the problem isn't the culture, the problem isn't the parents don't want their kids to go to school, the problem isn't language, we all know how to speak English now. So we need to actually look at what is preventing this access. And I think those are really things that we need to explore.
Great, thank you. So I guess through researching this, I started to think about, in terms of like barriers to accessing higher education, and then sort of policies that could enhance or remove those barriers or enhance the supports. I'm starting to think about sort of three different kind of refugee experiences. So there's those people who come to our country as youth, and they would probably go into the public education system. And so English language supports, other academic supports, career and or like in our case, pre-college advising. Those sorts of things can be buttressed and supported to help refugees come here as youth. There's two other groups as well, though. There's adults who come here without college background, and they want to pursue college. Okay, they're in a much different situation than the young people. They're under quite a bit of pressure to obtain rapid employment and what Becca was talking about, self-sufficiency. So quickly get into a job to get off of the resettlement and other social service supports. And so there's a lot of pressure on them to do that. That is a major obstacle to them accessing higher education. And then a third group, which I think we can help through some common sense policy changes, are refugees who come as adults who have college background. It could be a couple courses, could be a degree, could be Becca talked about that LSS had resettled a family with many advanced degrees. So people who come with those degrees, there's a couple things that can happen to them. One is I haven't actually ever seen this happen, but in the literature it's been reported that they get misclassified as international students. Okay, so if that happens, there's quite that's a big problem. But more generally, what happens is they get put into the same kind of vetting process. Their credentials get put into the same kind of vetting process that international students get. So they have to have their university in their homeland where they have their credential from send a sealed copy of the transcript to the university. Things like that that are really impossible for refugees to do. And so there's this, there's this concept of audit culture, bureaucratic and other sort of paperwork policies that are put in place. They're there for international students, but when applied to refugees, it's really just a very high barrier to accessing and an unnecessary barrier to accessing higher education. So I think that's something that some universities allow for quite a bit of flexibility. So I know Madison College, for example, isn't putting up a lot of barriers like this. Other campuses of universities do, and I think it's just a common sense policy would be to develop different criteria for vetting the education credentials called refugees. So universities need to know who are refugees and not put those obstacles forward. So those are some kind of like some common sense policy changes.
I think I had like a different questions to answer.
Well, do you have it? Did you want to talk about the challenges that exist?
Didn't prepare for those questions, but anyway.
You don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't pinpoint on one or two challenges, but I would say the most important one is just that refugee students to have access to the higher education, because not only that they are new to the country and English may not be their first or second language. In my case, it was my third language. So so the first thing is having people just to guide them through the whole process, the application process, the financial aid process, and how to navigate the whole system of the higher education. I think that is what I believe is the most challenging one. And beside of other things like language and culture, so having like access into higher education is the most challenging one. That's one thing I'll say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to add, I heard a term used, this is a term that's being used more and more, and I think it sort of goes a little bit to what Nancy was saying, but not refugee students, but students of refugee background. And that can pertain to even people who did not really come as refugees, but have that refugee experience in their history and in their background. And at the same time, it doesn't, people who are looking to shed that label for whatever reason, it's not saying you are a refugee and it's about that's your identity, but you do have a refugee background, and it's important to take that into consideration. Okay, so I think we got into this a little bit, but the next question that I have is what types of support programs can help overcome some of the challenges, and I think that Matthew did mention policy change, and that sounds like a big job to me, but and Nancy, did you want to speak at all to the programs that can help overcome the challenges?
So I am trying to recall my college years, but I don't think it's any different 20 years later. That the services are going to have to be holistic care. Refugee students need everything from mental wellness care to financial aid assistance to better counselors, consistent culturally specific counselors, possibly language-specific counselors, right? Counselors who are trained in racial justice work, in anti-Black work and anti-Asian work, right? Because all of those are the issues that refugees face on top of the racist structure that America has, right? So refugees are coming as a foreigner, and then on top of that, they're a person of color. So there's these like various systems that they have to deal with, and whoever works with them needs to have holistic understanding of who this person is. I think it's also really important that we have the understanding that a lot of refugee students are very much tied to their communities still, and they're tied to their identity, like their racial, cultural, ethnic identity, and we need to provide safe spaces for students here on campus. We need to provide resources for them. I do not want to see any more groups doing egg roll sales. Like that, to me, is an insult to our Southeast Asian students here on campus, that we still force them to do egg roll sales so they can have a safe space to develop their identity and to learn and to build. Like that's like a really simple example, but we ought to give them consistent resources and counselors year after year so that they can actually just build. And if we look at the recruitment rate of students, I don't know what the numbers are anymore. When I was in college, it was very, it was not great numbers, but the numbers of retention was even lower. So it's great that you have a few nice folks for your photo, your brochure, in terms of diversity, and you recruit all these folks, but you need to be able to retain your refugee students, and that ties into the consistent counselors, the consistent resources, the safe spaces, and really giving them the resources that are going to make them whole and feel accepted and wanted on this campus. And I know that not everyone in this room has friends who have that refugee experience. And you don't need to, I'm not saying you need to understand it, or that you need to go seek out those people to understand it. But those individuals are on your campus, and I know that they struggle, and I know that we have policies. Like when I was in college, it was like after 4 years of financial aid, that's it. You don't have any aid. Well, what if you have to send money home, and you have to work full time? You're not going to school full-time 4 years, financial aid ends at 4 years, now what do? Now you drop out. And I know so many people, refugee students, who drop out after 3 or 4 years to go home and do work, and now the retention rate is nil, right? Because we haven't been able to retain them, because we have policies like that. So I think we really have to examine, like, why is it that our refugees, why we're failing them, if we really do want to accept them.
Yes, really well said. I guess I'll just kind of echo it quickly. What Nancy was saying, I think the supports the general campus culture at a predominantly white institution like our institution, University of Wisconsin-Madison, is based on sort of majoritarian assumptions of the resources that people have, the kind of the background that they have, the social economic background that they have. Also, that they would that there's a sort of fairly linear kind of path through college as well. Refugees typically, from what I've been learning, and what sort of educators and refugee resettlement providers have shared with me, is oftentimes refugees will start college, stop, go back at it again. Other aspects of their life will play a role in those starting and stopping. So we don't know much about we don't track or refugees' experiences through college, and partially it's they don't often or always follow that sort of typical majoritarian, 4 years after high school graduated, 45 years after high school graduated, having sort of white middle class resources to support that academic and also extracurricular involvement. This issue of safe spaces and or just institutional spaces that are identity affirming is really a big deal at a predominantly white institution. Also for refugees, but also for second generation Americans, just minoritized students in general. Just kind of agreeing, echoing what Nancy was saying.
I do agree with Nancy and what Matthew said. On the top of that, one thing that I do appreciate, or I did appreciate, like when I was at Madison College, was that I got involved into the extracurricular activities that Madison College had, and being part of these programs make refugee students feel like they belong to. It gives them the sense of belonging that they belong, to the college. And again, one more thing that maybe Nancy mentioned was that sometimes the resources are there at the college, but us students, refugee students, they don't know that they exist already. So if nobody tells them that these resources are available, then there's no way they will get to it. So it goes back to the thing that I said, if they have like people at the college, like for example, like advisors and other faculty members at the college, telling them that these resources are available and you can go and use them. So those two things are, I believe, are important.
Okay. Thank you. So the last question for the group is, what can we as individuals do to work with students of refugee background who are pursuing college education?
I think the first thing is to lift the burden off refugee students. Don't go up to a Hmong kid and be like, tell me about your experience as a refugee student. That's trauma is the last thing they probably want to talk about. Educate yourself. There are lots of libraries around campus. There's lots of panels like this on campus. There's a lot of professors that you can talk to. Educate yourself about the different experiences of refugees. Every refugee came here through a different way, whether it's war or whatever it is. And from in different countries and different experience, and even if they're from the same country, it might be for different reasons. So educate yourself on that, and lift that burden off of your peers. They don't want to talk about it. And the other thing is, you all are paying tuition. You are the folks that pay for this university to exist, and you have the right to ask for more support for refugee students, and to say, I want my dollars to go towards more resources for refugee students, more safe spaces, more whatever they need. I want my resources to go there, because actually it's your tuition money that's paying for our administration and staff here and the buildings and everything. So you actually have a lot of power, and use your power. If you're a white student, use that privilege to actually empower other students who may not feel like they have a voice. And a lot of times refugee students feel that way because, again, to me, I say it's a legal term and it's a status, because I work with people who are refugees who can't vote. They can't vote and they're scared, and if you don't know, refugees are always subject to deportation. And if once you're deported from the U.S., you do not have the right to return home to the U.S. Even if you came here when you were 9 months old and you do something, you are forever barred from the U.S. So understanding that refugees, students may have fear over asking for resources because of their status, and really educate yourself.
So, just taking on to what Nancy was saying, there's a group here on campus that I'm really fortunate to be involved with. It's the Hmong American Studies Committee. And they've basically been arguing to this campus that that the university is remiss in its responsibility to educate people here, educate the students. In particular, we're thinking about students from Wisconsin who don't know anything about, they haven't been educated, as Nancy was saying. They don't know about who the Hmong are, why they're here, aspects of their experience, and they're not getting that education here. Also, Hmong students, they don't have the benefit of really, there's only really one Hmong identified person who's a faculty member. But they also often don't get the benefit of advisors who know anything about Hmong history and culture, or Hmong identified advisors. And so the Hmong American Studies Committee is basically trying to make the case that this is what's needed, better education. So you can educate yourself, you can also demand that the university pick up its responsibilities that it sort of outlines in its mission statement, which is to educate. So hiring advisors, faculty, and also recruiting more students who are Hmong or from other refugee backgrounds is something that we can demand from our university. university?
I do agree with both of them, and I just remember a joke that I did in one of my classes when I was doing my undergrad at Edgewood College. So I think it was the first day. It was the first day that we were introducing ourselves, and I said, "Hi, my name is Maryam, and I am from Somalia, a county that is located in southern Wisconsin." Everyone was like, "Okay." So I was surprised that they didn't even have like a question about it. And I guess it goes back that, the fact that, they don't know anything, and or they don't know, they don't know about Somalia or even where it locates. And it's hearing from refugee services is good, and learning about their background and their culture, that is important.
Great, thank you so much. So what I have heard of what we can do is that we need to take the time to educate ourselves about the various refugee populations, what they might have gone through, and some of the challenges that they are facing when they arrive, and lift the burden, as Nancy said, off of those populations and place it on ourselves. It would be good if we should support education at the primary and secondary levels in Wisconsin, of educating our kids about the various immigrant populations of the state, including refugees. And I just have one follow-up question for Matthew, but anyone can answer. I think a lot of this is going to go into policy change, right? And these policy changes that we're talking about will not only benefit refugees, but they will benefit other groups of people who are experiencing similar challenges. Do you have any ideas about how the people in this room can support those policy changes?
It would be nice if, as a group, we could narrow down, to a specific kind of list of policy changes. I mentioned, so I guess on this campus in particular, so we have policy on different levels, federal, state and community, and then also on campuses. And so I'm narrowing, one of the things I've really narrowed down on is like changing some of the criteria for vetting credentials. Like this seems to be an easy change to make, comparatively easy. And I would love to get that conversation going, because why have someone come to this country with all this knowledge and skill that we're then just sort of putting up such a high barrier that they to their using that or furthering it here through education. So that's one thing I've been kind of narrowed down on. But I think on this campus, supporting we can support organizations that are calling for more supports for minoritized students in general, for Hmong students, and then for other refugees, refugee students with refugee backgrounds here. So I think that's we haven't yet had enough of a discussion to figure out what are the list of policy demands, and so I think that's one thing we're starting here today. But when we narrow that down, I think we need to sort of get going on it. What do you think, Becca?
I think policy, it sounds a little scary, like that takes forever, it's not going to be quick enough to resolve situations, but it is actually one of the best tools that we have. And I know there's my colleague Hong is in the back there, and we're working on the Hmong education bill, which will demand that there actually is curriculum taught to our students in Wisconsin around who are the Hmong. There are other states that already have bills like this around other populations. This is not necessarily a policy, and it's a law, but I do think that you need to support people who are being deported. Especially in the Hmong case, it's just ridiculous that you fight for this country and then you get here, you are then returned back to this country because you commit a crime. And I get the crime piece, but to me that's also, I'm a lawyer, to me that's, you already served your time, right? Because deportation is not a criminalized process. So I think understanding what deportation does to refugee students and does to immigrant students and students who contribute to our country, but especially in the Southeast Asian case, like how ridiculous is that? To send a 9-month-old whose father fought for your country back to the country that he was fleeing in the first place because he, sold an illegal amount of marijuana or something. I mean, whatever the law it is. And then there's another policy or bill out that I think is somewhat related that I want to throw out there is Wisconsin is looking, I think it's called the driver's license bill that allows people who don't have legal status to drive. And we all know you gotta drive to go to work and to take your kids to childcare and to school and all. Like all of those issues are tied to refugee students and tied to allowing folks who don't have this kind of like permanent status to exist in our community and to be full members of our community. And so those are the first things I can think of.
I don't have anything on the policy.
Okay. Well, that's a good, we have some special questions just for Maryam. So can you share your education journey prior to coming to the UW in Madison?
Anyways, I did my primary education in Somalia up to 8th grade, and that is when I was in 8th grade is when I left my country, Somalia. And by the time I came to Egypt, Cairo, I was a freshman in high school, and I did all my high school education in Egypt. And just to give you like a brief thing between like the two educational system is much different. It's almost similar. So I didn't have I didn't face a lot of like challenges to adjust when I went to school in Egypt, and because I knew the Arabic language before I came to Egypt, so that was something that helped me. And but in my senior year of high school, my family and I did move again one more time to Green Bay, Wisconsin. Can you imagine that? From Africa to Green Bay. Anyway, when we came to Green Bay, Wisconsin, I was 18 years old by that time, and when we went through the K-12 system process, they looked at my transcript that I brought it with me, and they said that the only thing that I needed to graduate from high school was English, obviously, because I didn't know English at all. So that's one thing. Another thing that I had to take was American history course, which I didn't understand anything at all. Like when I was at that class, when I was in that class, like I didn't understand anything. I couldn't relate. That was the thing for me. But anyways, I did graduate 3 semesters later when I came, and after that, I decided that I wanted, to pursue higher education, and Green Bay was not the place that I wanted to start with my higher education. Do we have anybody from Green Bay, Wisconsin? Don't get offended at all. But anyways, we moved to Madison just because I wanted. Seriously, my mom. That was the only reason that we moved from Green Bay to Madison. It was because of my. I wanted to go to school here at Madison, and fortunately, I started at Madison College, and there I had the best experience that I could ever get. and I got the support that I needed and all of that. And I did my associate degree at Madison College. It took me 3 years, but finally I did. I did graduate in liberal arts, and then after that I transferred to Edgewood College, where I did my bachelor degree in education. That took another 2 years, and then I finally graduated with bachelor degree, and I came here straight to UW-Madison, and here now I'm doing my master's degree in ELPA program. So basically, it was a long journey, but I made it.
Thank you for sharing that story. And I know that, you know, you put a lot of work into what you did, and you say finally, finally, but I'm fairly certain that you did it pretty quickly, just from what I know. We do, just what you were talking about reminded me, we often have kids who arrive who are 17, 18, and we do get pushback from the high schools saying, you know, sometimes regardless of their English capacity, saying, oh, they should just go to MATC, which is, you know, Madison College is a great option, but our job is to advocate for our clients, and if they want to be in high school, they should go to high school. So that's another challenge that we have faced and our clients have faced, is the high schools pushing people once they're past a certain age out of the high schools. So that's just another idea of possibly something that people could do is advocate. So we have 5 minutes left before questions. So I'm going to skip to another question. What have you learned about successfully adapting to some of the challenges you have faced?
First thing is to be persistent, which means don't give up. That was exactly my first thing that I learned, because not only that, English was not my first language, and not that I was new to the country and I didn't know anything about the higher education system in America, but another huge aspect that I had was also other responsibilities, because I got married to a handsome guy who's sitting here while I was going to college. And we had our 2 boys, 4 years old and 1 year old, while I was going to college. And you know, you could imagine all on the top of what I was dealing. I also had that, and also another part that what did I say? Or someone else mentioned was you know, we have to my father, and he has other kids who live in Somalia, and you know, I have to support them and send money home. So that is so there's a lot of responsibilities other than being a student that I was dealing with it. Every time that I thought, you know, to give up, and I thought that I couldn't do it, I remember that I'm doing this because I wanted my children, you know, to know that this is capable. It's a doable, but it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of patience, and you know, not to give up. So that is one thing. And also, like, I had to work extra harder. One other thing that I noticed, you know, being, you know, a non-traditional student at college meant that I had to work extra harder than everyone else to exactly do what I supposed to do. So those are the things.
Okay.
Rebecca, can I add to that?
Sure.
Not to respond, obviously, but,
I want to emphasize too that people with refugee experiences, even if they are born in the U.S., still have to deal with trying to assimilate into the American educational system. I remember graduating from high school and I didn't even know what had happened. I guess my counselor made me fill out a college form so I got into college. And then the day that college started, that was my first day on campus. And I told my parents that I got into the dorm, and they were like, well, what are you going to do at a dorm? Are they going to feed you? Where are you going to live? And that day, my mom drove me to the dorm at University of California, Davis, and she moved me in, and it was a complete confusion for her. She had no concept of what and how this institution was going to take care of me. And I think that the trouble for refugee students is that even though I went through college and I went through grad school, I went through law school right there. For refugee students and students who don't ever feel like they have a place in the U.S., and I know that many students in this room who are from similar experiences I do will struggle because they don't feel like they ever fit in the community. And so with as many degrees as I have, my community, now I've been institutionalized, and I have a certain way of thinking about the world because of the way this institution has institutionalized me. I akin it to being in prison. And now when I go back to my community, I have learned things that actually don't apply to my community anymore. And so you're going to see that refugee students struggle with that. You send all this money back to your family and your home, and then you go home and you're the whitewashed, educated person of color in your family. And that's hard for someone who has worked so hard to, so you have to, we're getting it from all ends, right? And I think that I don't know how to deal with that on a service level. But at Freedom Inc., we deal with that by making sure that we have services that deal with cultural healing and transformative healing and looking at what the community actually needs and looking at what actually is going to work for their family, not from the top down, but asking them, what is it going to make it that your family is surviving and resilient and sustaining themselves. So again, just remember that refugee students are always one foot in either door, either country or either doors.
That's a very interesting point. By participating in our higher education system that we have here, that you're in some ways removing yourself and making yourself different from your cultural community and your family. So I want to open this question up actually to three of you, but I want it to be short, so like one sentence or two sentences. What piece of advice would you give to students of refugee backgrounds with aspirations to attend college?
Ask questions and seek help. Exactly. That is the first thing that I would say. I don't know how many questions I have, but it is. I'm sure. It's. No one's gonna get anything to you except yourself. So you gotta ask what you need, and you have to know where the resources are by asking people. So that is the advice.
So refugee resettlement providers like Becca and the other professionals, they're really good at sort of referring refugees to people who know and can help in the education sector. And there's a lot of that going on at Madison College in our community. So having your resettlement provider or service provider connect you with those resources, I think is the first place to start.
My advice to students is that you belong in this space and that you bring value to this space, and you need to learn the skills to speak up if you think that you can't speak up. There are lots of wonderful staff on this campus and resources that can help you build that skill to speak up so that people can hear your story and your voice because it matters.
Thank you. So that concludes the panel discussion. We're now going to open it up for questions, or if you feel like sharing a story. I see a lot of familiar faces to me in this room, So I know that people have some interesting stories as well. And I can move around with the microphone too.
Thank you for sharing your experience with us today. I am interested in hearing your feedback on this or your answer to this. Can you share an example of a unique experience that you have assisted a refugee family or person that have made you feel proud of your research and or your organizations? And what did you learn from the experience?
I guess, so I haven't done research, but I work with refugees pretty much every day. And it is a very, very stressful job, but it's also a very rewarding job. I learn a lot from folks who come here. It's like them coming here is holding up a mirror to my own culture. I grew up in Middleton, as they say, so I grew up just down the road. And even though I spent lots of time overseas, it shows me every day, like, the good and bad of where we come from, where I come from, I should say, and interesting parts about it too.
Yeah, go ahead. Did you want to answer that?
Well, so
Sorry.
I am. I'll say, so I don't have the sort of on-the-ground experience that community leaders and refugee resettlement providers have, but I have had, I have gotten some feedback from refugees who I've interviewed or worked with who kind of heard about the research, heard about, we've gotten some media coverage and television and stuff like that. I've gotten actually some refugees who said, like, yeah, you're getting that information out there, and that's really great. So I hope it's not a direct benefit, but it's like, creating community and discussion around this. That's evidence-based, bringing in evidence, I think, is what I hope to bring to it.
And was that research with the student groups that you did? Because I recently read that report, which a lot of students have done the research.
It's, so that's the Hmong American Studies Committee. I mentioned them earlier. It's a different project, different related projects. Some of them are here, and they've also done a lot of work advocating for Hmong students on this campus, bringing that to the administration, and also creating more visibility for Hmong students on this campus. That's just I'm doing that with a team of students and another investigator,
That just, it makes me want to also share that we very often get requests from people wanting to do research on the populations that we work with. And that does put us in an interesting place because we want to protect the privacy of our clients, while at the same time understanding that a lot of this research and the knowledge that comes out of it are going to be beneficial for these populations. So, I recently learned about a working group in Milwaukee that the State Refugee Coordinator's Office and some representatives of resettlement agencies there are working together with researchers and trying to come up with, a good way for us to be sure that we're protecting people's privacies while also, allowing, figuring out a way to allow clients who do want to participate and are totally open to do that. So if anyone is interested in being connected with the State Refugee Coordinator's Office about that, I can put a sheet and you can put your email and I'm happy to do that.
Is that a state governmental position?
Yes.
Thank you again for sharing your experiences and research. So I taught at Madison College for 9 years. I'm really happy to hear about your experience there and that it was positive. And I'm also not totally surprised because I think that Madison College does a really good job of supporting students from, I guess, more non-traditional backgrounds. I guess what I'm wondering is, and I don't know if anybody here can answer this, is how does the UW-Madison, which is bigger and tends to have a lot more of a, in my opinion, laissez-faire attitude about supporting students who need more supports, whether it's study skills or cultural supports, financial supports. Is there anybody trying to help figure out what they do at Madison College that is transferable here for support? I guess I'm wondering too, you know, do you feel like you have found some supports here? You know, I guess from my understanding, we're just kind of more lacking. It's not as intimate, it's bigger. It's the expectations are just, hey, you're here, good luck. But I'm wondering if anybody knows of how we could try to get more supports and kind of recreate it here, or do better, including things that I could do to help. I'm an advisor in the school of ed, so. I don't know if there's an answer to that.
Yeah. So, one thing I'll just say is, like, unfortunately on this campus, a lot of times it falls on student organizations to make this case. The student organization that I've been talking about, the Hmong Studies Committee is one. Also, Associated Students of Madison, they do a lot of work advocating. Often it's to the Dean of Students Office, who manages student support on this campus. You know, I guess we're just hearing a lot of like the great work that's being done at Madison College, and we should be motivated as a staff at this campus to take that up. But you know, like it's not necessarily fair that you know, that positive change on this campus needs to be done by the students. You know, like we should be partnering with the students.
Maryam, do you want to?
I think we're starting now, like having these kind of events is like it's like the start. So I think we're getting there, like, you know. But this is my second semester at University of Madison, and I don't like. I wish if I had, or like, you know, the kind of support that I had when I was in college, but I think it's because I'm new. That's one thing, and again, I didn't see any like organization like programs that is supporting like refugee students. So if someone else is needed, then
Hey, so I went to school here and I was here for 3 years with nursing. So when I was in MATC, that was the best thing ever. So when I came here, the CEO, which is like trio in MATC, but you don't get exactly that. It's like half of what I got in MATC. And when I was in nursing school, I was the only Muslim, but there were other students of color. So the only thing we could do is to work with other students of color, and some friends of mine and I created a group called Multicultural Students for Nursing Students. So that was only for nursing students, but the whole campus is big. Nursing school is all the way near the hospital, so there wasn't like a lot of support. We tried to make some events, but the school wasn't like that much helpful, especially with finances and resources. So I feel like UW Madison, like it is tough for you to maneuver through and learn the system and know who has your back, who can you go to, where will you find these resources, how are you going to survive. As a student of color, you only don't have to do great in your academic stuff, but you also have this other burden of your other people, because the class I was in was like 150 of us, and I was the only one. So you have that sense, like some days, where do I belong here? Can I be here? Like, do I have to work twice or 3 times where other students are? At the end of it, you make it, but how do you make it? And when you're going to school, not only academically you make it, what about your mental health? And I feel like that's like the biggest thing students of color really struggle with. And they don't have anybody to go to and feel safe to discuss that.
Thank you. I'm wondering, we have people from the UW here. We have a couple people from Madison College. I mean, maybe that's the first step, is talking to each other and seeing, and also including these students of refugee background to know what exactly were the resources that were the most helpful that Madison College provided. And is that possible, even something similar at the UW?
My name is Farhan. I want to emphasize points that Matthew make about the transcript and how it's very difficult. So I'll give you an example. In Madison College, if you bring high school transcript or high school certificate from your home country, they don't ask you if it's sealed or if it's, they only care if it's original. So for example, if you're a refugee or you left your home country, there's a civil war going on, the country is totally destroyed. The school you graduate, maybe it's not there anymore. So how can you able to get transcript that school? So in UW Madison, it's very tough. Even if I finish my liberal arts in Madison College, they still need my high school transcript. So which is very tough for students like that. You put 2 years Madison College, you finish your liberal arts, and you have associate degree, that should be enough. But at the same time, they will ask you to bring your high school transcript. A lot of students go back and do something called HSCD, which is like high school equivalent. So it's like a lot of work going back and forth. So that's really very important to give, extra look at those refugee students. If the students are not able to obtain, give them some rooms to understand what's going on. And the other part is, I work at Madison College, and I'm also a student there. So I'm a asylee refugee. So it was really very, very helpful to see image like me in Madison College. I'll take an example. One of the advisors at Madison College, she's from Liberia. So she knows what's like growing up in a war-torn country or fleeing there. So she can talk to you about what's going on in your mind, what's like coming to US. She has accent like you can relate to that. And she'll give you advice how you can maneuver the course of liberal arts. Sometimes you can take one course that will be equivalent to either humanity or your literature class. You don't have to take both of them. So if you don't have those kind of advisors who can able to relate to you, it's really difficult to survive or even make it. A lot of students will drop and not gonna make it. So also in the community of refugees, by the time my country civil war started, I was very young, and then we came to Kenya. I grew up in a refugee camp in Kenya, which is the highest populated refugee camp in the world, 1 million people. So you have a ton of trauma experience at a young age. So it's really hard in my community to talk about, what I feel, how I think, what was growing up there. And the counselors maybe not able to relate what you're talking about. They don't know. They grew up here in Madison, they never been in a civil war. So it's those kind of things really very important to have safe space to talk about all that. Thank you.
So we're running over time, actually. Can we take maybe one more question? Okay. One more question? Sorry, I'm mainly in the front here.
I'm working with refugee background youth, middle school youth in a Midwestern city. So my question is, I'm originally from Burma, also with communities from Burma. And my question is, these youth are likely to be ended up in underfunded school district. And also the high school is also likely to be underfunded. So it means like they've already been tracked before going into the higher education. And so from the higher education aspect or from receiving end, how do the higher education institutions consider these factors in recruiting these youth coming from different backgrounds?
That's like a very hard
I
question.
think it's very similar to like what you talk about. It's very similar to like the following experience. So even now, if I have a kid and I say she speaks Hmong and English, I have to denote that she speaks Hmong and English. If I do that, she might be attracted to a limited English proficient class, which therefore limits her to certain courses that may not allow her to apply for college like courses, and then therefore she can't apply to, so like that actually still exists. So it's very similar to what you're saying, like if you are Burma and you're in a certain special class, if you're in middle school and even high school, you're tracked a certain way, and you never get to higher education. I think one, educators need to know that process, that tracking process actually exists, and then how do you still provide the skills necessary for that student to survive in higher education. And I think there's a lot, especially refugee families, a lot that's needed to happen in educating families, because their families are very involved in that process. And so there's a need for a lot more investment in the entire community, not just working with that one particular child, right? And my husband's principal of middle school, and he doesn't work with only refugee students, obviously, but he understands that you need to work with the entire family, especially at such a young age like that.
Well, I'm sorry, we're out of time. Did you want to say a few words of closing?
We're very, very thankful for the forthcomingness and the stories and the dialogue here today. It's been quite a wonderful experience, and we're very